You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
And I think, back to kind of myself, I think that's the way I I feel like maybe I've tried to affect my children and the children that I have come across is to, continuously encouraging that process of creativity and continuing, and really trying to be um, I would say, super positive and super, to a fault of that because um, gone are the days. I think that's the other thing, right? So I think the immigrant experience is like you hold your nose down, you figure it out, you muscle through it.
Mhm.
They say you firm it up and you kind of push through. And many times that comes at the expense of the soft skills and the things that will really truly boost um, self-esteem.
Unpack the soft skills for us,
The
Sacha.
soft skills. So
Uh-huh.
so um, so it's kindness, it's nurture, it's politeness, it's um, listening, it's
Empathy.
empathy,
Yes, 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 yes.
creativity, all of
And
those
you had
things
said you
that,
had said kindness before, but for sure, yes, yes.
right, absolutely.
Yes.
Those are the things that that we don't
Mm-hmm.
we don't encourage. They kind of get pushed to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're living in a time where I think it's a very interesting thing. So on one hand, I think there's a sort of an awakening to mental health and um, to understanding feeling, to be encouraging things like therapy. But
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand, they are being bombarded by extremely sort of individualistic, especially the boys,
Yeah,
uh, notions of, okay, how can I feel better about myself at the expense of others,
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
which encourages the apathy and all of those things. And so it's to me that I do to a fault. Like I'm one of those people who, to a fault, people think
Mm-hmm.
I'm crazy, to a fault encourage using your voice, using those soft skills,
Mm-hmm.
using, um, you know, because I feel like there needs to be that balance because the world
Sure.
is absolutely encouraging, um, selfishness, ill-manneredness, impoliteness, um,
We
as if
validated that even with the election, man. Yeah,
yeah, as if to say those things are a sign of strength,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um, and I don't think they are.
This is awesome that I can even do this, man,
Yes,
because
it is. It is.
y-
I
you
mean,
know, just being able to say I'm disappointed in the direction of our country and having that ability and that opportunity. I mean, I think it speaks volumes, and I think we all need these spaces to just say, this is how we're feeling, and we feel this way because, and
yeah,
just have it be layered, have it be complex, have it be non-complex, however we want to. We have to be able to share these experiences, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And hopefully we can, actively work to safeguard that because who
Yes.
knows,
Because,
you know.
like you said with the books, I was only able to make sense of the world I was living in and where people were because of history. Not just history as taught by some people, but you mentioned the creatives, the people who wrote about those times, who wrote about um, what our feelings were, who wrote about what our hopes were. Those were the people who informed my world and my worldview, the artists, whether it was the rappers, the dancehall artists, the reggae artists, many of whom my faith community shunned or said it was taboo to listen to. But those were the one who gave me the context or the hopes or the identity even to love my nose, to love my full lips, to love my accent. It was coming from the larger culture and the type of resistance that the creatives offered in those spaces. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And they can affect us because they are so visceral and so, so it's not just a thesis that you're hearing and reading.
Sure,
But
sure.
once it's illustrated and I guess that's the thing, art does imitate life and absolutely, sometimes when the music has really, or has it? I'm like
Mm,
sometimes like, oh, the music has really changed. It has changed. I mean, I came up with like Latifah and all of that stuff, and things have really, in some ways, for some
I agree with
piece
you,
of
man.
it,
I was
really
doing
changed.
karaoke. I was doing karaoke on Thanksgiving, and Sasha, man, I know none of them songs that my kids like. The artists, and I mean, they were just singing, and I mean, the songs sound melodious, but I'm clueless. I don't know. I don't know none of
So,
these songs.
so I try to keep up in some ways, but what is interesting is that I think, like when we were coming up, there was the trash, there was the stuff that was just like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it was
yeah, yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah.
There is some good stuff out there, and I think
Sure.
that's the part is at least having that conversation about, yeah, why do you like Sexy Red, or why do you like Kendrick, or why do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think as there has to be, I mean, not everybody's going to do that, and I don't think that every adult needs to sort of have, but I think if you have someone under the age of 8, 17, 18, you should figure it out, because
Sure.
I think giving them that space to kind of discuss why do you like it, what does that mean, what does it mean for you and how you see yourself,
Mm-hmm.
is really, really important. And I think, it I was talking to a guidance counselor about this specific question about, oh, social media, or I have a kid that's always online and da da da. And he said the best thing you can get to the best outcomes have always been relationship. Always. So what needs to consistently happen in any household is trying to foster those open lines of communication
Communication.
and
Yeah.
relationship, and modeling good communicative skills.
Yes, yes,
Um, and
yes.
more than taking them to church, more than taking them to school,
Mm-hmm.
more than turning it off, those things have to happen, because even if they were in a bubble,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to communicate, and that's something that we, um, I don't know, it's an art that we just have. It's very, very hard for many human beings. Communication is very hard.
I have about a few more, and I always say a few more because I know how I am. I'll say a few and then it turns to five or six. But I want to ask you, how did you deal with those points where, like your mom did, she surrendered her green card? Was there a point when you wanted to just call it quits on the American dream and go back home?
Ryan, oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We were actively looking to go back to Jamaica before the children were born, and then the children were born, and then it got very complicated. Um, and then having the opportunity to live in the UK, which was a really great experience for them. I'm really, really so happy they had that opportunity to see something outside of the US,
Yeah.
just for their own growth, and their own sense of independence, was really fostered, because it's a different society, and they treat children differently in some ways.
Wow. Wow.
Meaning, things like
Hmm.
what we experience in Jamaica, you get to school by yourself and
Hmm.
things like that. Just once you want, I mean, maybe like a city kid, a New Yorker probably would have a very similar experience. So
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
different from their suburban experience. So yes, I have actively wanted to do that. It's not, as you know, it's very hard. And this is the question that we're going to all have to face at some point in life is what are the true levels that we're living or where we want to abide in, right? Like, so on one hand, we have all sorts of critiques about this place or that place, but we actively strive for certain standards of living and the things
Sure.
that are negotiables and non-negotiables. And the fact of the matter is that I think movement, migration is actually easy and hard. And I say this to say, I think for years and years and years, people all over the globe move. We move to where the water is, we move to where the
Hmm.
food is, we move to where the jobs are, we move to where the safety is. We consistently move. Humans have to move. And the notion of building these boundaries, which has become a huge part of 21st century life, are these stringent boundaries
Sure.
tied to the ability to have a passport and the privileges or a visa or a green card,
Hmm.
or status. Status is everything. And so yes, I would in a heartbeat. I
Hmm.
think I think this country is amazing in some ways, but there's so
Hmm.
many things about it that I would like to not be a part of,
Wow.
especially now.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so yes, I have thought about it. Next.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And listen, man, the larger culture, very often, you hear this, America, love it or leave it. But I think people like you and I, we can even be nuanced to say, listen, life might have been better for us had we stayed in our home country. But we're not saying that there are not opportunities in in
Oh,
America. It's
absolutely.
it's 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 very
Absolutely.
nuanced.
Oh, absolutely. And I absolutely think that America affords exactly this,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
ability to speak about certain things in a certain kind of a way, the ability to have access. I think, for example, things like I'm going to plug libraries again, the library
Hmm.
systems, the
Yeah.
public library systems are amazing. Some of the advocacy systems are amazing. And it has been a space for so much art and culture. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And advancement, if you're talking about economic advancement, but of course there are, all of
Hmm.
those things. And I think in many ways as well, um, that is the reason why people come to America, is that it
Yeah.
is was one of the most open
Hmm.
spaces to be, to bring a family, to afford more.
Hmm. Hmm.
The question is, I guess, as humans, and when we understand climate change, when we understand
Yeah.
just the depletion of resources, what is more now? What is more, and is it sustainable, and is it something that you're willing to just lose everything over? So yeah.
And I wanna play a clip. I'm gonna just share my screen and I wanna ask you two questions on that. I think the first one has to do with your passion for exploring how people make meaning and express post-colonial identities in Caribbean culture. That seems to be a pain point for a lot of people, but I want to know how and I think I may have a sense of one of the answers because you spoke about the creatives and how that's
Hmm.
a part of your work that you seem to enjoy the books, the history, the arts. Um, but I also want to know how we tie hope to these expressions and the clip I'm going to share now.
I do see it differently because I'm thinking about the people who are not a part of anybody's elite who are hurting tonight. There are African-American women who know a little bit about being talked down to and know a little bit about having their economic dreams crushed, who tried to dream a big dream over the past couple of months. And tonight they're trading in a lot of hope for a lot of hurt. And they were hoping that maybe this time, one of their own could be seen as worthy. And once again, they were facing rejection. And that hurts. They thought tomorrow morning they're going to walk out with their shoulders back a little bit, maybe able to breathe for the first time and feel like they belong someplace. They did everything that they knew how to do. And it's going to be harder than it should be tomorrow for them to hold their heads up. And they're not the only people who are hurting tonight. If you're a parent of a trans kid, your child's face was used as a springboard to power for somebody. That doesn't feel good. There are going to be people tomorrow, we're going to be handing clothes at the dry cleaners to people who don't have papers. There are going to be people who are going to be cleaning your teeth tomorrow who don't have papers. And they're terrified tonight. And so it's easy to blow this off. Oh, look at the elites. They're going to get their comeuppance. It's not the elite that's going to pay the price. It's people who woke up this morning with a dream and are going to bed with a nightmare. And those people deserve to be respected and held and talked to. Those are the people who are going to pay the price for whatever Donald Trump decides to do.
Like the Bible says, like the Bible says, but like we have come to know the word, I think there is hope in the spirit of understanding that crisis and pressure and human lack just means the ability for God, the supernatural, to come in and maybe not so much make things better or right, but to truly show us his presence and his the ability to show us his peace and his sustaining love. So I would say that from a sort of a, I don't know, not religious, but a spiritual perspective, I think there are times when things like this happen to show us that, or to amplify that. On a more sort of a human level, I think that just like in nature, you need manure for things to grow. I think you will find that out of this absolute stress and hell that might ensue, that things will grow. Humans are irrepressible. Over and over and over again, Earth's history is replete with this sort of behavior and the beauty that can arise out of it. You know, with travel, it's amazing sometimes how I think the one thing the democratization of travel has done is to allow people from all over the world to visit other places, right? And even though with tourism, there's a sort of a pretty patina that is shellacked on various cultural experiences, what is always evident is that, you know, whether it's in, you know, Sri Lanka that just came through a civil war, or Indonesia that, you know, or Vietnam that actually literally had a genocide, or South Africa that had apartheid regime, people will consistently, because of the indomitable spirit that I think God gives, rise. It might be hard and it may take hundreds of years or tens of years, but we do. And I know that that kind of, in some ways, goes against, maybe not goes against, but it doesn't, so we as an Adventist, or as an Adventist, we tend to think about things more linearly, in a sense. We kind of say, well, Jesus will come and clean it all up. And while I do believe that there is a return, imminent or not, I think that even if we personally don't see it, or our children don't see it, or if they do see it, I think we still have to, again, amplify those things that are what he asked us to amplify with his help, in any situation. So the kindness, the understanding that, we have to go beyond ourselves and what we want materially, so longing for the things that last, that there's no expiration date, or, they don't fade away. And in a time like ours, I think we really have, in Western society anyway, gone so far. Even amongst people who are believers, have become so far ingrained in consumer capitalism, which is really harmful. That we maybe it is that sort of, maybe we might get that wake-up call. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I think those sorts of things, to me, give me hope, and gives, because I've been holding my breath. I really have been. I know there's this thing that I've learned about in therapy that I do apparently a lot, which is catastrophize, which is to find the catastrophe in every situation.
I love that. I love that.
Happened, because let me tell you, oh my goodness, the emotions for the last 3 or so weeks, and continuously, like, I literally will wake up and just be like,
Sacha, it feels like you
worst
have a
case scenario. It feels like you've been given 2 months to live, kind of thing.
It feels like you have a Jamaican parent when they catastrophize.
Exactly. And I have been absolutely doing that. But I, thankfully for my faith community, things like remembering that this lovely young lady said, to what did she say again? She said, worry is idolizing problems. And so things like that are really instructive. And I think, as much as the 92 say they're going to sit things out, and I'm a part of them, I don't think we will. And I think that will maybe change the way we do things. Maybe it will be a change of, let us embrace not just each other, because I think there's that way where we're like, okay, let's just do us, which I don't think is I think it's helpful, but it's not, I don't know. Let me leave it at that. But I think if we just embrace those skills that we do innately, we do it all the time, and we've been doing it for so long. Empathy, kindness, integrity, honesty, nurture. I think we continue to do those things, and do them even more intentionally than we have been. I know it's so much energy. It takes so much energy. Finding that balance as a Black woman of all of those things, especially in the face, I think that's the interesting thing about the times that we're living in. I think there are things that we've always known, and there are things that we have so many forebears who have always stood on the forefront, right? Whether it's Octavia Butler or Zora Neale Hurston or Toni Morrison, or there's so many, and those are creatives. And I know I've just named creatives, and there are others in lots of other realms who have, really championed living out loud, living in your truth. There really is so much going on, and we kind of shoulder so much of that, and are sort of the prism through which people look at the world, right? Like we, as I said, most of the movements have been, there's a Black woman somewhere.
Sure.
And I don't say that in a sort of a conceitful way. It's just, I think it is what it is. But we are going to also at the same time going to have to figure out as well how not to burn, not just to burn out, but it's a double-edged sword. Because I think, what is really puzzling to me in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 years is sort of there's been this counter narrative of, Black women being too strong, and Black men being like, oh, they want high value men. But, there's sort of that serious backlash even within our own community about just who we are.
Right.
And that is the part that is a little bit, and I see it happening, especially even in our church. We kind of don't talk about it in that way, but there's that sort of a messaging in some ways. And it's really fascinating because, again, even in our Adventist churches, especially in immigrant and in immigrant ones, the ones that I've been a part of, women are huge. If the women stop, then things would fall out.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting time because we're more educated and more aware, and a huge powerhouse economically in some ways. And it's almost like with every advancement, there is backlash, even amongst the people who you would think that you wouldn't get the backlash from.
Sure.
So it's a very interesting thing. And I get why people are just like, I'm done. I'm done except for what I think I need to be done for, because it's a lot. Like it's huge.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see this period for me because for lack of social media, otherwise, I can't tell of a time in our history when those who've shown throughout time and history that the resilience that we've seen have articulated that position. And it may be just that it's a rest that's needed, and that's entirely appropriate. But to your point, it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Absolutely, because you're right. Like I mean, it's hundreds of years. Like if you just, it's sort of consistent sort of shouldering.
Sure.
And it very well might be the looking at this younger generation who we have nurtured, but who have become very adept at voicing the fact that we should be more transparent about what it actually takes to be. I mean, they do it to the next level in some ways, like, and I don't like, I don't generally participate in that sort of every generation before will kind of like, oh, that generation is this or that generation is that. And it's sort of done in a negative way. But I think what has happened is that, in my observation, I would say, the millennials and the Gen Zers have truly sort of embraced the things that we were trying to teach them in some ways, right? Like, be conscious of yourself, be intentional about certain things, be, a little bit, maybe be a little bit more transparent. I think the transparency is huge because what has happened, especially I think in Jamaican culture, and I still don't think our Jamaican culture has reached the level of American culture in terms of transparency, but we honestly shouldered so much in the dark, in the silent, not sharing. It's shameful to let people know, and that has been really detrimental to everything. It's amazing how much people you'll hear little things here and there, but truly saying, okay, these are the generational curses. We don't do that. And I think in the end, now there's a certain group of black women who are like, we've seen it. We don't like it. And we're not going to continue to pretend that, we have nothing to do with it, and we're not going to own the fact that we are, I think that's the other thing too, is that owning the fact that yes, we do hold up so much. Because for so long it was almost like you would not want to, is it pride? Am I being prideful? Am I being whatever? Right. No, it's literally owning, yes, we do so much. And so much that people would like to pretend that we don't, we don't affect, we're supposedly the ugly ones, but yet still everybody's copying our hairstyles and want our bodies. We're supposed to be the ones who are not that intelligent, but yet still we're the most educated set. We're the ones who are supposed to be, lacking moral skills and whatever, but yet still, our families can thrive, even if we might not be blessed with a partner, so we were consistently kind of dealing with all of this gaslighting, and finally we're like, no, this is what we are doing, and this is what we are, and we have been successful at it, and we are qualified, and we have been leading, and we have been working, and we have been educating, and we have been comforting, and we have been doing all of these things. And agitating and organizing.
Being a Black-owned business extends so much further than making great products. It's about representing the 8 out of 10 Black businesses that failed within the first 18 months of launch. It's about giving hope to the 4% of startups that are founded by Black women. It's about using our influence to affect change in the communities that look like us, and proving to the next generation that no matter the color of your skin, nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I listen, I have so much, the same sadness, the same longing, the same hopes that were expressed in the vote by our sisters. I share, and I'm hoping that whatever support we all need, we will get it during these very challenging times, and we'll be more supportive of each other, and we'll create spaces where we can voice the same sadness, the same hopelessness, and not be judged. Because, I think you still have to voice how you're feeling. It doesn't mean that's in your mind a permanence, but I think we have to allow for those spaces for people to put up the memes that I see now with, the women on top of the building
I
drinking
know.
tea and the buildings are burning, or, we're sitting the
Oh,
next 4 years
absolutely.
out. We have to allow for those spaces because there's a context, and you so aptly described what led to that feeling. It's not a moment or just 4 years. It's the fatigue from feeling like you're carrying everybody's burden. Dr. King, almost finally, Sasha, Dr. King spoke about the heart condition and humanity in a way which seems seasoned with a lot of hope. But I think he also recognized that without a shift in the heart, a lot of these systems that we currently have, there's no hope of having parity or equity. Um, just finally, for my listeners who are in that space where they feel that things seem a little hopeless in terms of a hard shift. Um, you think Dr. King made room for that option as well when he gave those speeches about the heart, that maybe people just won't ever come to a place where they see the humanity of others?
All right. I think I think this needs to be the opportunity
Mhm,
for all for anyone who is so interested to truly find that space for spirit and for God in their lives, in a sense that I don't think it can come otherwise. And because, unfortunately, um, the current situation in the United States is so deeply crouched um, in religious terms and supposedly Christian terms. I think what's going to happen is that there is going to need to be a true a true personalization of that for the individual, and then from that, meaning personalization of God, because I think the human, the flesh does not truly have, maybe I might not have the true capacity for that heart shift.
mhm.
So I think it has to, in my mind, come from a space of spirit, in whatever form you find it, and that understanding that it might look different from what you're used to.
Mhm,
And that's a scary ideal in some ways.
mhm.
I think for example, if you talk about, Adventists, I think Adventists are sort of, preparing themselves for that. Like I think there's that movement for that.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, because we are in many ways so institutionalized, I think that might be an issue.
Yeah.
Um, I do think as well, um, that more than likely, hmm, that hard shift in Western consumer culture is very hard to achieve, outside of something totally otherworldly and totally different. So a total eschewing of
Mhm,
certain sorts of values. The unfortunate thing with that is that is almost revolutionary, right? Like if you hear that and then you go, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Like,
It's not going to look like anything that happened before. I know that, so it's not, we know that we've seen all the different systems fail if you're a student of history. But I think finding spirit in wherever you find it, and wherever it is revealed to you, is essential. I'll just put it at that, because I think it is, and it will probably end up being truly more individual and less grand scale community based, honestly, because to come out of any system using another system is really hard. Using another similar system is really hard. So I say that to say, so for example, I say I'm Christian. But then there are lots of people who say they're Christian, and we actually have very different notions of what that means and what that looks like. And what I fear, because we are not only it's not only political and economic, but it's absolutely cultural. The cultural war is going to be real, and unfortunately as well, it's already within the society racially coded.
Yes.
And so I think that's the part that is again, when I catastrophize it all out, it could look like in various ways, and has already looked like all over the world. I think, the interesting thing about life, and if you study history, is that, some historians talk about 6 cycles and all of those things, but there have been points in Earth's history where we are very similar. And, it's really, it can get really dark, and can be really dark for a long time. And how do you prepare your children for that? How do you prepare yourself for that? How do you prepare for that eventuality? Is something that we are going to have to actively do. And I don't know, so we have different mindsets and different ideas. Some people are like, well, run away and sort of become something totally different, and stay by yourself. People have done that. Or it might be a time to say, rightfully so, it's time to leave the system, time to move to somewhere else. People have done that too. You move somewhere else and try something new. But if you can't move, and you can't, so it's going to be very interesting. It really, really, it will be. And I think in the end, what we have control over is ourselves. And we have some control over our families, but truly we only have control over ourselves, and we can only continuously model. Right ways of being, and I think we can, if we're wise, we will take. That's the beauty of humanity, and I think that's the beauty of humanity, is that our bodies know. Our souls know, our history, that we kind of do have some inklings, many of us. It's whether or not we choose to listen and to open our hearts. But then on the other hand as well, realizing that the other thing that I like to realize as well is that sometimes we just get caught up in situations that we literally have no control over. A woman in Palestine, or in the Sudan, or in Eastern Congo, or in Ukraine, like there are times when we will be overtaken. And God help us.
God help us.
Help us.
And I'm hoping, wherever you are, whether you're an immigrant without papers or whether you are in, as Sacha mentioned, an area where, you know, there's no regulation and violence comes at every turn without warning, that you will find support and help. I mean, even in my own space here, I'm finding that with periods of rest, I'm a lot more creative. And when I think about vulnerable populations, whether it be the 69 kids who are separated from parents every week in our family court system, or people who are dealing with complicated levels of grief, or people who enter our sanctuaries randomly, I'm really a lot more intentional as an advocate and as a leader because I recognize God has called me to do more for people, and in doing more for people, I become more alive. You know what I mean? So I think it points
Absolutely.
to that creative um, thing you identified in your passion for exploring how and making meaning of a post-colonial Caribbean culture. That's how I found some meaning, man. So kudos
Yeah.
to you, Doc, on your work, man, and on your advocacy and on being a thought leader, one that I've always appreciated in my time in knowing you. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, Viewers and listeners will know our conversation was pretty lengthy. So some of what you get won't be everything, but because I think there's so much here to share, and I may even consider doing a part 1 and 2. But thank you so much, Sacha, for joining me on the What a Word podcast, to share from your heart and to share from your history and to share about your own journey. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And I don't feel, full disclosure, worthy of all of this, but I really do hope that whoever is listening, that there is to know that there is within us all this place of renewal and creativity in all of us.
Yes,
Whether it's in whatever we do.
yes, yes,
God
yes.
has placed that within us all. So, absolutely.
Blessings, sis. Thank you
Thank,
so much, man. And
thank you
I
for
look
continuously
forward to
having
your
us.
journey. And as we talk about the next 4 years, you and I will probably have to have a follow-up on what's taking place, how
Absolutely.
people are
And
maneuvering
and
through,
absolutely. And
adapting.
let us, I think the other thing that we don't do as much is connect. Like, let's be intentional about connecting. And this
Indeed,
was a wonderful way to do that.
indeed,
All
indeed.
right.